Elizabeth Barrett-Anderson here. If I have her bio, if I can read it out really quickly. Miss Elizabeth Barrett-Anderson is a former Attorney General of Guam, a former senator, retired Superior Court of Guam judge, and is the first Chamorro female attorney to be admitted to practice law on Guam. She served as legal counsel to the Department of Education, and it was Governor Joseph F. Atta who nominated Barrett-Anderson as Attorney General of Guam and served as AG from 1987 to 1994. She left her post as Attorney General in July 1994 to run for the Guam legislature and was elected to the 23rd and 24th legislatures and later nominated by Governor Carl T.C. Gutierrez to become a judge of the Superior Court of Guam. Judge Barrett-Anderson retired in April 2012 after 14 years on the trial court bench and an aggregate 33 years of government service to the people of Guam. After her retirement from 14 years as a trial court judge, Judge Barrett-Anderson continued to work as a senior judge pro tempore assigned to traffic court. Judge Barrett-Anderson is also the recipient of numerous local and national awards, and so if you can join me in welcoming Judge Elizabeth Barrett-Anderson, who will be our speaker today. Thank you.
Continue to stage. I want to thank AGA, and I want to thank Rachel Field for inviting me. I thank Vince for emailing me about 2 months ago to come to this. I want to congratulate all the new officers of AGA, Rachel, Artemio, Cora, and Joy. Congratulations, Joy, on CGFM. I know what that is. I've done my homework, and of course I want to thank Dr. Crisostomo, my niece and member of my family, for bringing all her students here, and we have more tables on that. I want to introduce to you, my husband is Daniel Anderson, Dan Wave, Bank of Guam. My sister-in-law, Dolores Muña, who is my treasurer. She volunteered graciously to be my treasurer for the campaign. And my niece, Jessica Barrett. She is the CEO for Barrett Plumbing, if you ever need any plumbing. And by the way, she's the first certified female plumber on Guam. If you want plumbing needs, go to Barrett Plumbing. And at the same table with my family and my team are two longtime friends, currently and still Assistant Attorney Generals. They were Assistant Attorney Generals when I was there 20-some years ago, and they're still there. And so I'm so happy to have Happy Runs and Deborah Rivera. Deborah's a short timer, but I'm going to try and convince her maybe to continue to stay. But thank you very much, Happy and Deborah, for being here. AGA. Maybe I can put my PowerPoint up. Can somebody help me with my PowerPoint? I'll be very honest, I didn't know much about AGA, so when Vince emailed me, Vince, where are you? Okay. I said, who is this? Who is this? But I was very impressed with his email, and so I said, before I say yay or nay, I wanted to find out what AGA was. So I went to your website, and whose picture pops up? Doreen. I went, oh my God, I'm going to be there. But not just the fact that Doreen is your past president. I wanted to find out, and I always do that, a good speaker finds out more about who he or she is speaking in front of, so I wanted to find out what AGA was, Association of Government Accountants. And I've done my work on your association, formed in 1950 nationally, and 1970 here in Guam by Professor John Phillips, right, Mike Phillips' dad. You've been around since 1970. But I wanted to find out more about what you did. And the more I researched, the more I absolutely became so incredibly impressed with the work of your predecessors your current officers as well. You have, okay, go ahead. Oh, back. AGA, I found out that A is not for association. It's for accountability and advancing government accountability, AGA, which is wonderful. Your official title is the Association of Government Accountants, but your mission is advancing government accountability. And this organization and your founding members and those that have preceded you in the last 2 decades have done so much work in this mission area. I wouldn't doubt that the original procurement law, Public Law 16-124, might have had the thumbprint of your founding father, John Phillips. Public Law 1844, which was the amendment to the original procurement law. And what I found more recently that impressed me so much with this organization was Public Law 30-127. Professor Crisostomo, if I asked your class, would they know what Public Law 3127? And if you don't, you better find out about it, because she's going to test you on it. It's the Citizen-Centric Report, CCR. You all know it as a CCR. And Public Law 30-127, passed in 2010, was a remarkable accomplishment of AGA. Now, Judy Guthertz may have introduced it and got it through the Guam legislature, but I know this is the association that put that bill together. And it was extremely helpful. As I started pressing these little buttons, it said, go here, go there on your website. So I pressed, go to the CCRs. And then it had 2010, 11, 12, 13. So I pressed 2010. And a whole slew of government agencies showed up, including the Office of the Attorney General. So I clicked on the Office of the Attorney General. I've been away from the Office of the Attorney General for 20 years. So I wanted to know, as a citizen, what has the Attorney General's office accomplished, or what has it gone through, at least in the year 2010, 11, and 12. They've yet to file for 13, but I'm sure when this airs on KUAM and PNC that General Pottas will get his office to get that filing in for 2013. I'm sorry if you didn't hear me before. This sounds a little bit stronger. And so, if you go to the Office of the Attorney General, and you look at 2012, it follows the requirements for the CCR, and the CCR has 4 pages. The first one is information, right? Something about your organization. What is it all about? Its missions, its goals. If you can go backwards. Its mission and goals, CCR. Page 2 is the performance. Performance measures, you know. Okay, we know what you are, we know what your mission is. So tell us your performance-based outcomes and measures. And then the 4th, I believe it's just the funding. How much is local and how much is federal funding? So let's go to the mission of this wonderful office that I hope to return to shortly. And the 2012 mission of the Attorney General's office, it's a pretty good mission. Keep our island safe, keep our island community safe. Make you feel safe in your homes, in your property. I don't know where that noise is coming from. Second, fair enforcement of the law. Unbiased, you know, justice is blind. Justice is blind. Fair enforcement of the law. And then the last statement in the 2012 CCR, which also was the CCR mission statements for 10, 11, I'm sure will be for 13. Provide quality legal advice and representation for government of Guam. The solicitors. those fine Assistant Attorney Generals as Ms. Deborah Rivera, who guide the agencies day in, day out in their work of contracting, procurement, personnel, and everything else, yada, yada, right, Deborah? Okay. So I thought I'd take a look at the performance. And performance comes in numbers of stuff. And if any of you have seen a CCR of any agency, page 2 of a CCR are the pie graphs, the pies, and the graphs, and the percentages, right? Am I correct? Page 2 tells you how much stuff an agency has done. How much stuff. So let's go to the Office of the Attorney General, just for comparison of 2012, 11, and 10. Let's start with 2010. CF is criminal felony. CM are misdemeanor cases. So we have 762 felony cases and 235 criminal cases, so roughly about a little under 3,000 criminal adult cases. JD are juvenile delinquency cases, and JDC are juvenile drug cases. So for 2010, 262 juvenile criminal cases, delinquency cases, and 99 drug cases. And the drug cases are in high school, and some of you are just out of high school. And the drug of choice in high school is marijuana and alcohol, or alcohol and marijuana. So the JDC are the drug cases where children are caught with in possession of marijuana or alcohol. 11, we go on, roughly about 2,000 criminal cases, 727, 13 for misdemeanors. There's the JD record. And in 2012, again, roughly about 3,000 cases now, and maybe about 560 juvenile cases. So CF of felonies. So this is what's filed. In 2012, 1,167 criminal felony cases and 1,800 misdemeanor cases. That's a lot. We only have 7 judges, by the way. Only 7 trial judges. And the average, ladies and gentlemen, of criminal cases filed on a yearly basis is about 700 to 800 felony cases and about 1,200 to 1,300 misdemeanor cases. That's our caseload. That's our caseload. I went and decided to compare the Office of the Attorney General with the Superior Court of Guam, where I used to work for 14 years. And ladies and gentlemen, you're numbers people, right? Doreen knows I hate numbers. I'm really, really bad at numbers. But I hope you'll enjoy this comparison of 2 CCRs for a period of 3 years, the Office of the Attorney General and the Judiciary of Guam, JOG. And you're going to notice that but for 2011, the figures don't jive. And if you are accountants out there, reconciliation is at the heart of what you do. And something doesn't jive, right, Doreen? You got to find out why it doesn't jive. What was interesting about the CCR is I'm just an average citizen, and I looked at this and I'm wondering, why is it that the numbers between the Attorney General's office and the Superior Court of Guam don't jive, or not consistent, except for maybe 2011. We can go to the next one. So what do these figures tell us? Well, to me it tells us this. First of all, it tells me that the Office of the Attorney General and the Superior Court of Guam, we need to reconcile these figures. What are the true figures? Because out there in the public domain are figures that are not consistent for the most part. Secondly, in my mind, it's just stuff. It's just numbers. You know, Plato said that a good decision is based on knowledge, not numbers. So what I want to know is not just that there's 2,000 cases on average filed in criminal adult court and 600 cases on average filed in juvenile delinquency court, but what do we do with those numbers? How many of those cases were brought to successful prosecution, either by a plea agreement or by a successful jury trial to a conviction? How many of those adult criminal cases were dismissed? And why were they dismissed? I think the prosecutor's office and the attorney general's office as a whole, and every prosecutor, should be accountable for their caseload and what occurred. Now, I will tell you, we've got some really, really good prosecutors at the attorney general's office, but we also have many young ones that need training. And how do you train a young prosecutor? Well, you sit down and you go over their performance standard, right? Accountability. You got a case, you won it, congratulations. You got a case, you dismissed it. Was it voluntarily or involuntarily? What happened there? So that's accountability in those figures. And for the juvenile matters, for the juvenile cases, should we be prosecuting over 600 juvenile cases every year? That's a lot of kids. I believe in juvenile drug court. You're found with marijuana or alcohol in school, you're going to be accountable in juvenile drug court, and you should be accountable within 24 hours in front of a judge for finding marijuana on you in school. That's the proponent of juvenile drug court, immediate accountability. For DWI, when I built the DWI court, it's accountability to your drug offense, your drunk driving offense, within 48 hours, because you will be arrested, booked and confined. You will be in front of a magistrate within 48 hours, probably charged with first or second offender drunk driving, and in front of the DWI judge, who used to be me, within 2 weeks' time. And hopefully your case is resolved, and either you have paid the price for your first offender sentencing of 1 year in jail, mandatory 48 hours, $1,000 fine, and treatment. That's accountability. And the figures that you see in the CCR don't talk about that accountability. They're just numbers. They're just stuff that's given out to you. But DWI court makes the defendant accountable within a very quick period of time, rather than the way it used to be. 1 year or 2 years later, we used to arrest a drunk driver, book and release them. Odds are they're going to commit a drunk driving offense again. They might have a second or third one, or worse, get into a drunk driving accident and kill somebody. But we don't do that anymore. It's accountability of the defendant and accountability of the process, the criminal justice system and the process for that type of offense. So I like to look at these figures and say, with regard to kids, are we just sending them to the criminal justice system and teaching them that they're bad kids and they're good and they might become an adult criminal? Do we teach them that when we send kids to the criminal justice system and family court? I don't know. I think kids need to be counseled. I think kids need to have better parents, get out of dysfunctional families and have a better environment. So I don't just think that 600 cases that are filed in juvenile court is a good thing. I like restorative justice, by the way. I am a therapeutic judge. I like restorative justice. I like rehabilitation. I like treatment, because locking up somebody and throwing away the key isn't solving anything. It just overcrowds our prisons, and we don't have any more beds at DOC, and nor do we have any at DYA. So I'm a restorative justice kind of judge. Let's have children accountable and responsible for their crime. That is what I found from CCR, and that's what CCR made me think. Now, mind you, I'm not the average citizen out there looking at these figures. I know exactly how the Attorney General's office functions. I know how it works. I understand the criminal justice system intimately. I have been a professor at UOG for the last 10 years, and I have taught LW 404, Administration and Management of Criminal Justice Organizations, for 10 years. So I know how the criminal justice system works. You have in front of you a 7-bullet point platform. If you don't have one, there might be some still back there. So if you want to know what my platform, here's 7 simple bullet points. Increase successful prosecution. I just talked a lot about that. Strengthen child support. Now let me tell you, we have 13 account techs, accountant technicians, at our child support office in the Attorney General's office. We bring in $17 million in collectible child support. I'm almost tempted to ask how many people here either receive or pay child support. Would you be willing to raise your hands? Who receives or pays child support? Raise your hands. Okay. A receiver or a payer? A receiver. The Child Support Division and the work of the Child Support Office affects over 11,000 to 12,000 cases, and multiply that times the number of children involved in a case. Let me say that again. 11,000 to 12,000 cases. When I left the Attorney General's office, it was only 4,000 cases. It has tripled in 20 years. And we have 13 account techs and 1 accountant. Believe me, I am going to be calling on the AGA and your offer for training to bring training to the Attorney General's office. Because if $17 million is being collected, I'm hoping that $17 million is being distributed. And another aspect of AGA's accomplishments is Public Law 2635, which is can anybody tell me what that is? Accountability of dispersing officers. If you don't know about it, read it. It's a piece of government legislation that says if you handle cash, if you receive money, if you disperse money in government of Guam, you are held by the standard in this statute. I'd like to see all of GovGuam employees trained on that so that there is accountability. Because accountability just is not a dispersing officer's responsibility. I think accountability is an every employee responsibility, no matter what you're doing. It's an every Government of Guam employee responsibility. Go down the line, crime victims, high on my list. I'm hoping that we can really develop a true crime victims program, maybe a nonprofit organization out there. Rebuild solicitors. Deborah, I know you're leaving us, but I am committed to revamping and strengthening the solicitor division because it's those solicitor attorneys, solicitors are attorneys, who advise and assist government Guam agencies on contracting, procurement, personnel, and just about everything else. Train notaries. Anybody a notary here? Any notaries here? My sister-in-law. She's a long-term notary. Notaries are so important because they verify the person who signs a very important document, whether it's a deed, a banking document, or any kind of documents that you and your work develop for people to sign. Every dollar, first of all, the Attorney General's office not only examines people who want to become notaries, monitors the notaries out there on Guam, but also enforces the notary laws. But every dollar of money that is paid when someone wants to become a notary, take the examination, and to renew their notary certification, that money is supposed to be returned by the Attorney General's office back to the notaries for training. Am I correct, Dolores? I have not seen a training for the notaries of Guam since I was a senator in 1996, and I did the notary training. When I was Attorney General, we had two trainings for the notaries. We repeat that. Every dollar that is given to the notary, given to the Attorney General's office when a notary applies or renews their license should be used administratively as well as for training. That's on my number 5 on my list. I talked to you about restorative justice, right? And 7, rebuilding the criminal justice system. And that just comes from my years of teaching at the University of Guam and working on the bench for 14 years and wondering why the left hand and the right hand in the criminal justice system just don't talk to each other. We would have better prosecution if the working relationship between Guam Police Department and the prosecutor's office were a lot stronger than it is today. So that's my concept of rebuilding the criminal justice system, but not just GPD and the AG's office, but it's DOC, it's Customs and Quarantine, it's the airport, it's Guam Airport Authority, it's all law enforcement together. I have twice as many concepts and ideas, but I thought 7 is kind of nice just to write in a little piece of paper, and this was easy. If you want to talk to me more about the various ideas that I have, I'd love to hear from you, but in saying I want to hear from you, I'm going to end my talking to you. I like to talk with you and ask you to remember that a good decision is based on knowledge and not just numbers. And with that, I thank you for inviting me here, AGA. I want to be a part of AGA, maybe not necessarily a member, but I want to stay with AGA, work with you, work with training. And I am more than willing to open myself up to any questions if I can answer. And Dr. Crisostomo, I hope your students have a lot of questions for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So Rachel, is it open for questions? Anybody have a question? Did I give you too much information? The students, Dr. Crisostomo's students, do you have any question at all? Did you not understand anything I might have said? I'd be more than glad to clarify. Anybody? I used to always say, don't be afraid to ask a question because you might think it's a stupid question, because I'll tell you, there are a lot of other people in here with that same stupid question, but they're too afraid to ask. And there's no such thing as that kind of a question. Dr. Crisostomo, any questions from your class? Any questions from anyone? Vince?
Thank you. Actually, today's meeting was supposed to be set up with Attorney General Lenny Rapadas as a forum with Elizabeth Barrett-Anderson. Unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, he wasn't able to make it today with us. So we did actually have a list of questions. I have 10 questions.
Sure, I'll try.
Go ahead and write them all down as I'm going through them one by one. Actually, one of the main, we actually were only going to ask 4 major questions, but the main question that we wanted to ask is there public corruption on Guam? And if there is, could you please explain how you, as the next Attorney General, will address public corruption on Guam?
I don't know what the answer is to, is there public corruption? You want to answer that? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Then there's your answer. How will I handle it? I would like to be able to set up what the Attorney General's office has never been able to set up because it's a funding issue. And it's what I call accounting forensics. Accountants who are investigators. The federal government has that in the Office of the Inspector General. Do you ever wonder why when the federal government goes after, when the U.S. Attorney's Office files a charge and goes after somebody, they got a good case. Just recently, there was a billions, I forgot, what was the $1 billion number, where the U.S. Attorney sued, what was those, it wasn't Merrill, I hate to say, during the 2007 Wall Street crash, one of those big banks, too big to fail. And you kind of think, well, this is 2014, and the great crash was 2007. Well, when you have that kind of internal corruption in the banking industry, it takes a lot of investigation. So Vince, I would like to see a unit of accounting forensic investigators. There's no such creature, there's no such position in the government of Guam. So I'm looking at really accountants whose job it is when something comes up within government of Guam that you need the expertise of a CGFM trained accountant to be able to determine whether there is corruption or not. And a lot of the corruption has to do with money, figures, etc. And the average prosecutor does not have that skill. The average criminal investigator does not have that skill. But it takes money to be able to kind of create that unit. And if there is a complaint filed, Vince, it's not going to happen in 6 months. It may not happen in 1 year. But the Attorney General's office does have subpoena power through the special grand jury. And if we need to get, documents from outside of government, or we need to get government documents by subpoena, then you can do that. So Vince, my answer to your question, is there corruption in government? I don't know, because I'm not sure we know how to get to it. Any other question?
Okay. My name is Ricky Hernandez. Of the four questions that we were going to ask, one of them was, what do you think about the proposal to have an elected prosecutor and an appointed AG? What are the benefits and detriments of each?
In my last term in the 24th Guam legislature, I went to Congress to testify for the elected AG. And a lot of the impetus behind this Organic Act amendment really focused on the prosecutor's office. There was a concern of interference with the prosecutor, the Attorney General's office, and influence to the prosecutor that was not based on that mission of fair prosecution, equal enforcement of the law. But I knew, Rick, having been an appointed AG, that there was a great risk in developing an elected AG unless we properly establish the foundation and accountability of the role of the Attorney General. I have sat patiently for a decade watching 3 elected AGs who are my successors. And some good, some not. Some actions extremely good, some actions not. And I believe that we have to reassess the role of the elected Attorney General. Should we keep it? Personally, I'd like to keep it, not because I'm running. I like electing my Attorney General. And under the Attorney General is the Prosecutor's office. But there is a foundational problem. How do you become an elected AG and have an elected governor who is your client? And where you disagree with your client, how do you resolve those conflicts? How do we build a solicitor division where the Attorney General puts an attorney in every government agency to properly advise the agency, and when the governor decides that his agency needs to go this way, and I as an elected AG say, no, it should go that way legally, you're going to have a big fight on your hands. Simplistically, Rick, if you return it to an appointed AG, the problems I just mentioned about the conflict of representing the governor disappear, and then you just have the prosecutor. So that's really, really, really simple. But my question is, do we have the resources on Guam? Do we have enough experienced, qualified, whether it's attorney generals or prosecutors or whatever, to really vie for that office? I don't know. I will tell you this, if I'm elected to be in there, within the first 90 days, I will have met with the governor, whoever is successful as governor, with the legislature, and I will propose a piece of legislation that properly constructs the elected Attorney General so we can try and eliminate those conflicts. And if the legislature wants to ask me, do you think an elected prosecutor is good? I'd say, sure, that's good. Personally ask me, I think elected AG, and I think the people still like to have their elected AG. We just need to take care of the conflicts in the foundation of that office and restructure it so that it operates for the future. Okay. Do you have another one?
Sure, I'll go ahead and ask.
Okay, it's 8 minutes left, or 5 minutes left.
obviously you running has something to do with this question, but how would you grade the performance of the current AG or the AG's office over the last 4 years? And are there any opportunities for improvement of that performance? Where would you see those?
Vince, I'm not here to be a grader. That's not me. No. And please understand that it's very difficult for me to criticize and to grade my successors. I've been there. I know how hard that office is. I know what it takes to do a good job as Attorney General. So yes, I can see some of the flaws in my successors, whether they were appointed successors to the Attorney General position or the last 3 elected. And whether it's appointed or elected, the people who have succeeded me, I have great criticisms and I have great compliments for many of the things they have done. But you're not going to get me to say, grade my opponent's successor, because I won't do that, because I know how hard that job is. Yes, Happy.
You mentioned earlier some thoughts about restructuring the Attorney General's office. And over the course of time, sometimes the Civil Division and the Solicitor's Division have been separate divisions, and sometimes they're combined. What, if any, thoughts do you have about which direction the office would best be served by?
Well, you know, Happy, I remember our time way back, and it sure ran pretty well when we had 12 solicitors and a Deputy Attorney General of Solicitor, and we had 12 litigators and a Deputy Attorney General of Litigation. And although the work of the 2 divisions crossed over, and a lot of times you had to defend the work of a solicitor when you totally disagreed with the opinion of the solicitor, but the lines and the divisions of the office were clear. And when you took a case to litigation, you had to deal with that opinion, whether you agreed with it or not. And if you disagreed with it, then you probably offered a good settlement on a case. So I'd like to see that structure. But another option, because this is an elected position, it's not appointed anymore, and the rub is between the role of the Attorney General as advisor or the role of the Attorney General as referee, like in procurement. Is the AG a watchdog of the work of the governor and his agencies, or is the Attorney General the counselor to the governor and the work of his agencies? One other option, elected prosecutor, go back to appointed AG, and we just restructure it as that. The other option is to maybe to create something called the Office of the Solicitor, which is an appointed position, which is appointed by the governor. And then you have career solicitors, classified attorneys, that work with the agencies on a long term. That's another possibility. How it's going to be structured, I really need to get back into the office and talk to everybody there. Ladies and gentlemen, these 2 ladies are just 2 of 53 assistant attorney generals in that office. And these 2 ladies bring to the government of Guam over 20 plus years each, not combined, each, of experience as government of Guam attorneys. They've been here for a long time. And there are still many of them in that office. Shannon Taitano, which is Jessica's classmate, John Weisenberger, Fred Nishihira. There's just so many of them. Happy's husband, Ken Orcutt, Chuck Kanunan, they're all there. And if I can work with them to say, I'd say, Happy, how can we fix it? How can we make it better? How can we have an elected AG and elected governor? I believe there's only one elected governor on this island. There's only one chief executive of Guam, not 2. It's not the AG and the governor, it's just one, the elected governor, who sets the policy direction of this territory. But the elected Attorney General is the chief legal officer of the government. What does that mean? What does that mean? It's probably beyond a lot of you to try to comprehend. But directly answering your question, Happy, if we can bring it back to the days where it worked and functioned well, I've seen it, you've seen it, we've all seen it, Deborah's seen it. Why can't we repeat that? Maybe it has to be tweaked a little bit because it's an elected AG. But I am absolutely convinced we can do that. I don't care what you call it or what shape it's in, but we know we can get there. I am positive of that. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? If not, that's 1 o'clock, and it's been my pleasure. Those students, Professor Chrysostomos, she's got a lot of homework for you